Okay, let's talk about pitch notation. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm going to kind of rush through it a little bit because there's really no easy way to teach this to children or better way. I'll give you a couple of hints here, but mostly this is just going to be a review from what you've already seen in the educational portal videos. So, pitch notation, again, we're notating how high or low the sound is. And this is where it starts to get tricky, and this is where students have to have a lot of practice to get this concept. This isn't something, it's not like you can't take a kindergartner, teach them a few words and hand them a book and expect them to read it, okay? You've got to practice, and you've got to practice, and you've got to practice, and it takes years for them to be able to get to read fluently, and it's the same thing with music. And if they're only getting 30 minutes a week or an hour a week of music training, and they're only doing notation for a small portion of that, you can expect it's going to take them at least 5 years probably for them to be able to start reading music well. And that's sad. It would be nice if we had more time in music classes, but we don't. So the first thing we got to learn, and one of the worst things as a music teacher is having to draw lines across boards, but we have to do it. So now we have another staff. This time we have a pitch staff instead of a rhythm staff, and a pitch staff consists of 5 lines. And we notate them from bottom to top. You've already been taught all this. So first line, second line, third line, fourth line, fifth line. Okay, so there's our staff, and again we can divide this up into measures using bar lines, just like our rhythm staff. Now the first thing that we have to do on a staff to tell us what notes we're reading is to put a clef. And the first clef here is called the treble clef. Looks something like that, and you can have your students draw those on paper to practice, certainly. This is the treble clef. So a clef tells us which notes go on which lines and spaces. Okay? This one being the treble. Treble means the high notes. If you turn up your treble on your radio or your CD player or whatever you got, that means you're changing the higher frequencies. Okay? Let me draw 5 more lines. And down here we're going to put our other clef that we use most frequently, and this is called the bass clef. And I can put a bar line in there. Alright, now these clefs also have another name. This one is called the G clef because, and really this is just a fancy symbol to circle around this line right here, the second line, which is G. Okay? So that's what that is all about. It's telling you that this is G. And down here where these 2 dots are, and also where you start drawing this, is the F line. So this is called the F clef, and this is called the G clef. So that's almost easier and better for you to remember that this is F clef and this is G clef and that this is bass clef and treble clef, because that doesn't really help us unless we're playing the piano. Okay? Alright, so now I know 2 notes, G on the second line and F on the fourth line. Okay? Now I can draw notes on the spaces in between the lines or on the lines, and I'm just going to put a whole bunch of notes on here so that you can see, extend my staff out here a little bit, how this works. So if I have all of these notes on every line and every space, so this is a space, this is a line, this is a space, this is a line, and as you're teaching notation to children, you will want to practice that, okay? Just go like this and say, is that a line or is that a space? And make them tell you that that's on a space, okay? Is that on a line or is that on a space? Make them tell you that's on a line. Then they can start noticing the difference between lines and space notes, okay? Alright, now we know this pitch right here is G because it's on the second line. And what I have to tell you next is that we have 7 letters that we use in music. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's all we use. We don't have H through Z. Those are outlawed in music, okay? So, G is our last note, and once we hit G, if I'm going up, that means I start over again on A. So this next one is going to be A, and so on up the alphabet. So really that's pretty easy if you want to learn it that way, and some students learn better. So I would teach in multiple ways when you teach notation. Okay, so we've gone up the alphabet going up. Now we're going to finish these last three here. I have my G on the second line, and keep in mind the lines go up. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from bottom to top. Same thing down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because we read going from top to bottom, it's kind of hard for students to get the concept that they've got to think in bottom to top in music, so make sure you pay attention to that. Alright, so the note below G here, I just look at the note, the letter before there, we have F and E and D, okay? So that finishes out my treble clef notes, and I can do the same thing down here, but I'm not going to with my bass clef. I have F on the second line, so I can figure out going up and down using those 7 letters again. Now, the more common way to teach pitch notation, or the letter names of these notes, I'm going to turn this into a note here if that's okay, is to teach them the lines and the spaces. So we've already talked about practicing lines and spaces with them. And this is the reason why that's so important, is so that they can get this concept. Now what I'm going to do, I can tell that my lines are E, G, B, D, and F, so I'm just going to write those in here. E, G, B, D, and F. Now I would teach that to the students, that the bottom line is E, the first line is E, second line is G, third line is B, fourth line is D, and fifth line is F. And then I would have them come up with a saying, words that can go with each one of those letters. There's some common sayings that we use when we teach music. Probably the most common for the treble clef lines is "every good boy does fine," but let them be creative. Have them come up with their own options there, and if they do, they're going to remember it a lot better than if you just say, okay, it's "every good boy does fine," that's all you're going to use. Some of the ones that people have come up with that I think are just funny, my favorite one is Elvis's guitar broke down finally. And I didn't make that up, my students didn't make that up, but there's a lot of interesting ones out there. I'll tell you another one that did get made up in one of my classes a little bit later. Alright, so "every good boy does fine," or whatever they come up with there. And for our spaces, we know that they are F, A, C, and E going up again. And the cool thing about this, we usually just use that word F-A-C-E or face because it rhymes with space. And they can remember that the treble clef spaces are face, okay, F-A-C-E. And again, you would want to practice with this. Put a note on the staff and say, okay, what's this note? It's on a space, so we're going to use these things. It's the bottom space, so that's an F, okay? And teach them how to use these things. Let's see, I've got a note there. Is that on a line or a space? It's on a line, so I'm going to use "every good boy does fine." Every good boy. Boy starts with B. That's that, okay? Alright, and I can do the same thing down here in the bass clef. Let's go ahead and stack our notes on the lines and on the spaces. Now I already know this, but my lines are G, B, D, F, A. And my spaces are A, C, E, G. Okay, so again, have them come up with something. Some that I use in my classes. A lot of times music teachers will use good boys do fine always, but I think that's too similar to "every good boy does fine," and it's confusing. You've got to have something that's distinct, okay? So I like to use something like Grandma Buys Donuts from Aldi, or Great Big Dogs Fight Animals. Those are a couple of popular ones. One that somebody made up in one of my college classes was George Bush drinks fermented artichokes. George Bush drinks fermented artichokes. That was kind of funny. For the spaces, all cows eat grass or all cars eat gas. Two easy to remember ones. And again, practice. And make sure you're practicing separately. Make sure that they know that this is bass clef and this is treble clef, so that their mind can put those in two different compartments, because you don't want to get this intermingled and have them start using the bass clef sayings for the treble clef notes or whatever, okay? So be careful of that. Okay, one other game that I like to do with my students, and this tends to work with just about any age, is I'll put a box on both sides of the board and split the class into two teams and put them in rows. And basically the first player on this team and the first player on this team at the front of the line, they both have a marker, and I'm going to draw a note on the staff, and I say go, and the first one to write the correct letter in the box gets their team a point. And this is a great assessment tool, because every student is having to show you if they know how to do this. Some of them are going to be faster than others, and so I would tell them up front that even if you already know the other student's written it in, you write it in too, and try and kind of block the board so that they can't see what each other's doing. That way they're not just, oh, well, he put an F, I'm going to put an F. Make them try and figure this out on their own. They've got to be able to do it on their own. Okay? All right, now we need to talk about one more thing here. And I wish I would have put my two staffs a little bit closer together. I can hook a treble clef and a bass clef staff together, and I put a little bracket on it, and now all of a sudden this is called a grand staff. And this is used mostly for piano. The right hand will play the treble clef notes, and the left hand will play the bass clef notes, but since they're getting played together, then we hook this together and it becomes one piece of music. If I'm playing the flute or if I'm playing the guitar, usually I'm just reading one staff of music, and so I don't have to deal with reading two at a time. That's why playing the piano is so hard, is because you've got two lines of music going on at the same time. And if you add another one, organ players actually have a third at the bottom for the pedals, so that can get pretty challenging. All right, so on a grand staff, I need to back up here. I can extend my staff downward and upward with little lines. If I put a little line below here, a little line above here, these are called ledger lines. That's an accounting term, which I have no idea why we stole it from accounting, but a ledger book is just a book with a bunch of lines where you can put your numbers. But a ledger line is a line that helps me extend the staff, because obviously these aren't enough notes for our instruments that we have. The piano plays well above and well below these staffs. So I can put a note on my ledger line, I can put a note above my ledger line, I can put a note below my ledger line, and I can put a whole bunch of ledger lines like that. If I'm a flute player, I'm always reading notes up here. If I'm a tuba player, I'm always reading notes down here. So depending on the instrument, you have a specific range that your instrument's always playing, and you just have to deal with those ledger lines and learn how to play them. Now, one of the most important things let me erase here quickly. On the grand staff, and this only applies to the grand staff, we know that this line right here, the first line, is E, and so this below is going to be D. And now if I put a ledger line note right there, that's going to be C. Okay? On the bass clef, we know this is A. Grandma buys those from Aldi. Above that is going to be B. And a ledger line is going to be C. you'll notice that that first ledger line, both going up from the bass clef and going down from the treble clef, is C. Now we have a special name for that because that's basically a connection point, and if this was closer together like it should be, it would show that they're in the exact same place. But this is middle C. And a lot of piano teachers get confused with this. They think middle C is called middle C because it's the middle note on the piano, which it's close, but it's really called middle C because it's the middle of the two staves, the treble clef and the bass clef staff. So that's where those two meet on that one pitch. All right, I think that's about all we need to know with this, and there's going to be a couple more videos dealing with accidentals and key signatures, but again, keep in mind that students need a lot of practice with this. You can't just teach it to them and expect them to learn it overnight, and so give them worksheets, have them do examples. We do a lot of music math. And I should have showed this on the rhythm notation, but I can say that plus this equals what. And if I'm in the time signature of 4/4, which we'll just pretend that's always the case right now. So I know that that gets 4, this gets 2, so the answer here is 6. And you can do all sorts of hard ones. But there's lots of fun and games. There's a great website posted at the bottom of the resources folder. You can go check that out and practice this stuff, naming the notes and things, because the more students can practice on their own or practice by doing, the better they're going to learn. So help them to do that.